Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I believe we're going to be bringing our speakers up here in just a moment. So a quick reminder, go on to Slido, have your questions at the ready, or obviously we'll have the handheld mics available to you. We'd love to make sure that we can follow up with some of the speakers. And I've got a couple of questions for them myself. Very quickly, you heard Kieran speak about Global Tech Advocates. We're delighted to be working with Kabula on a series of events this year with our Global Tech Advocates Data Tech Working Group. I know we have some advocates in the audience here today. For those of you who are not part of Global Tech Advocates, we, Kabula and GTA, will follow up with you afterwards. You're all very welcome to join our community. We've got some exciting things planned for the year ahead in terms of activities and events. I started this journey just over 10 years ago when Pavel had Kabula as an idea in his mind. I started with Tech London Advocates. We now have 34 groups around the world. We're adding another 5 more this year. We are all volunteers. We're tech leaders, investors, experts, community organizations, really focused on supporting startups and scale-ups wherever they are in the world. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome all of you into our community. So with that as just a bit of a teaser for you, and we will follow up with you, can I ask our 3 wonderful speakers to come on up to the stage? And I'm going to open up my Slido here and get ready. And we've got our roving mics here as well. Whoops, thank you. Thanks, Matt. So whilst you're working on Slido and getting your questions ready, I've got just a couple of questions to kick us off. And obviously, I've got to go to Pavel first, because we've known each other for 10 years. I can't believe it. Can you go back 10 years ago, and you've been phenomenally successful in the data space with Kabula, and it's just wonderful to see what a success story it is. What advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know today, going back 10 years? And I'm asking that because I know we have a number of aspiring data companies in the business, or probably some people here who are thinking about setting up their own business. So go back in time, knowing what you know now, what would you say to yourself?
Okay, Russ, thanks. I can't believe it's 10 years neither, but all the wonderful work you've been doing. Thanks for that. Well, there's my co-founder, Peter. Raise your hand, please. And yeah. We talk about this a lot of times. We have, kids the same age. We spend a lot of time together with our kids, and we always talk about this. There's one thing I think we going back we would do differently. Go faster. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's hard for us, coming from where we are and coming from the background we are. Yep. But we always try to make things perfect before we start market them. Yep. Right? So it took us several large clients and several, really successful implementations. Yep. And people coming back and taking us to new clients. So we would actually say, oh, it's good enough. We can go now, right? So I would say, going back, we would just go faster. We would see first, it's great in US, right? US is awesome, oh, we have something which works on the slides, let's just, market and sell it. For us, it's kind of always oh, let's make it perfect before.
One quick follow-up. Is there anything that you would do differently now, knowing what you know now? Anything that you think, oh, if I only had done this or done that, I could have done this better?
We would actually get sales team much faster.
Okay. Very good advice. Emma, let me come to you. You gave us a very broad picture about the geopolitical landscape, governance, what you see from an AI perspective. And you and I spoke earlier. One of the things that we were talking about earlier that I'd love you to share more about is the need for diversity. I speak to a lot of people. I speak to a lot of women, people of color, people from different ethnic backgrounds, people with disabilities who are worried and concerned that the speed, the rapidity of what we're moving towards could really damage the way we're trying to build these things without diversity and inclusion underpinning that. I know you've spoken out about this before. Would you share your thoughts as it relates to data and AI, but maybe more broadly as we look at the data ecosystem?
Sure. Thank you, Russ. So my fear is that with AI and just basic maths, we end up with something that looks really homogeneous, really vanilla, all of those terms. So actually the real exceptions that make our world really more interesting just get pushed further and further to the edge of the plate, because actually how AI works is, or based on the maths, is that the data outliers don't get picked up. It's the masses, and I get that, right? We appeal to the masses. When I've spoken about this before, I highlight that there are no left-handed ticket machines on the London Underground. Doesn't matter to me. I'm a lefty, but it doesn't matter. But if you're, but there are really basic things. It's an infrastructure. It's a barrier. There will be other examples like this that unless we have diverse teams that are aware of it, we really risk losing some of that. And then we're faced with machines where we try and kind of interrogate them or try and get some kind of redress against them as to why his decision's been made, and we start losing it. I think the other issue, and this is the whole ecosystem, to my mind, needs to be looked at. When I'm a UNESCO kind of on their list of experts, and they push for more of a gender lens, and that language can turn people off, and it's like, oh, why is that needed? But it's this idea that it's diversity of thought, and people are, you're all on LinkedIn, you see the article after article about proving there is a clear business case with companies that have hedged their risk, that they've built in different considerations on their product. And I think right from, startups with a whole range of investors, and I'm going to highlight something else. So for instance, in December, the UK Treasury made a decision that it seems like a really innocuous decision around who can be an angel investor on an income threshold. They raised it from 100 to 170K. Okay. That removes 70% of women based on gender pay gap. Nobody's thought of it. It was unintended consequences. And now, actually, my LinkedIn is covered in it. We've set up an open letter to the Chancellor. We're pushing to get this reversed next Wednesday as part of budget. The point being that it's the female, if we remove the female angels, they back female-founded companies more than twice than the male investors. And what happens is our pipeline breaks down for us then to build these wonderfully diverse, data companies and AI companies where we can actually compete on some of these different things. So it's really important. Thank you for raising it. But the business case is clear on this.
Very good, thank you. I'm conscious of time. I want to bring the audience in. So I haven't seen anything on Slido, so please put something in Slido. But we've got a couple of roving mics. Who's got a question for Guy, for Pavel, for Emma? I'm going to call on Tracy second, and we'll go to you first. The gentleman over here, Adam. Whoops, sorry. Well, we'll go to Tracy. All right. Over here first, and then Tracy second. Thank you. Adam.
Hello. Very technical question to Emma. Do you know what Kabula stands for?
Nope.
Okay. Do you know what Kabula stands for? No.
Me?
Oh, maybe Pavel can answer that. What does it stand for? Anything? And why
originally, it didn't stand for anything. Peter can answer that because he's the author. It was a random name generator cross-check with free.com domains. But it randomly, it randomly, like as a tech guy, how would you choose the name, right? Yeah, not the most creative. But randomly, actually, it selected this name and it called Peter's eye because, like in Czech, it actually is a nickname, for big head. Like if you have a big head, you have a big Kabula. So it was like, and that's the logo came from. Oh, but who has a big head? Octopus. Okay, nice. And then, actually they have a tentacles. Data. Sounds good. So it's like, we reverse engineered a story around the logo and company, but originally it's a normal tech, company, just like random name generator.
Excellent. Now we know. Tracy.
So my question is probably for Pavel, but anyone can answer it. So we sit on so much data, and we don't probably use it properly for the betterment of society. So I'm just wondering, what would you say to leaders of companies or the boards that basically are too scared to look at their data, to cleanse their data, analyse their data, and use it for the betterment of society and their customers and the value chain, so the suppliers as well. So what would you say to them? Because there are a lot of people that have just got their heads buried in the ground.
First of all, that's a great question. I kind of worry that most of the boards don't care about betterment of the society. They care about their companies. Even though they proclaim in their ESG reports, like when they ask you. But second, it's actually, usually it's, in my experience, it's not the C-level that would be worried, to look at the data, use the data, automate. It's usually the middle layer where things get stuck, right? So my question, if I may rephrase it a little bit, like what I see, I talk to a lot of board members, do workshops. They know what they want. They want to use their data, but there is always someone from IT saying, "Oh, it's hard," or the second version, my favorite, "Give me 2 more years and 20 more people, and I will solve it myself," right? And so, honestly, I think what I see is the generational change. The insurance company I was mentioning earlier, for years they just didn't want to do this, right? But now in their board, they have 2 women, who are around 30 years old, and they are the ones who are actually pushing for the change. So, it's a generational change. And when younger people come in, they just push for it. They want to do database decisions. They want to automate things. They just want to use it.
Guy, any thoughts on the question?
Yeah, but I'm usually the IT side that says, "Give me 2 years," and
You are the IT side.
I know, and that's why we brought you in at Kindred, because this tool helps us go to the data side quicker. I agree with Pavel in the fact that management and boards like data, they want data. Sometimes they don't know what data actually stands for in practice, but they do. And the bottleneck that I feel, at least on my level, is on either the middle layer or the infrastructure. Either the data is somewhere in log files or in a legacy database. For instance, I have a lot of data in Oracle, which is a very painful database to deal with. And there's a need to migrate and automate, or it's not modeled, it's not cleaned. And I think that second layer, where this company gives us a good platform for that, that's where you unlock that. And I guess also infrastructure costs are also something to be mindful of. A lot of companies, and for instance, Kindred is no exception, we're making the migration, but we have been historically an on-prem company, so we spend money on data centers and database and maintenance and an entire 200, 300 people. And that slows you a little bit down, and bringing things into the cloud is speed. Yes, good point. Speed. Speed.
Emma, come on in.
Just quickly, kind of seeing in the future, there's a school of thought coming through on data trusts. So if you think about kind of what the open source software community did many years ago around this idea that they could collaborate, this idea that you could establish a data trust for an industry or a specific purpose, that allows you to pull data between companies and you set the purposes. You could say that it didn't need to be, it couldn't be used for competitive purposes, but that would also stop the infrastructure piece. And it'd be really interesting to see how that emerges, because then you only need one pool. And the trusts are something, it says it in the name, but you could very clearly establish what it could be used for, etc.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
I believe in zero trust policy. First.
So it's,
I understand.
It's an English law
concept.
Yeah.
And I see Matt there. Can you raise your hand? And there was Mike somewhere. And it's like, yeah. But Matt works for a company called Harry, and before he built for Harry the platform on top of Kebula for analytics for hospitality industry, QSR basically. They work for 60 different clients, including McDonald's. Yet we actually work for other hospitality clients in US like RBI Group, Burger King.
Yeah.
And so what we see, like if you go to them and say, hey, build a data
That's
trust.
a data warehouse.
If build a data trust, how you can share and stuff.
But it's a data warehouse, sorry.
So what is the difference?
The trust is set up for a social purpose. So for climate data, and this is it. These bloody lawyers, right? There's a concept called.
That's why we don't like them, right?
Yeah. But a trust is like you think of a family trust where you've got a pot of money and you can go to it for certain purposes, and you have guardians independent guardians that determine the access. So it's not about monetizing the data at all. It's about it's a social purpose or some around that.
So how would that work for business?
So what I'm saying, so you would end up pooling within an industry, because there may be on climate data. Actually, a business doesn't need to pay for storing this kind of this data. And it's a way of slashing costs, because it's a shared infrastructure on it. You don't need to store it in your part, and you don't need to maintain it. You can actually spread that cost around the industry. It also means that you could apply the AI on it. You could put a tool.
But by definition, you say it works only for kind of like non-profit data, but not for individual
but there's
data.
still quite a lot of data being held. But I agree. It's an evolution beyond the warehouse and monetization.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions on Slido. Well, actually, quite a few, but I'm going to jump in here and then we're gonna wrap up. So let me see. We've got Cameron Middleton. Says, go fast and see what breaks is effective for large organizations. What's your advice for small businesses who can't afford initiatives to fail that often? It's probably for you, Pavel, to start us off.
Well, first of all, go fast and break things, was Facebook motto and didn't work out too well. There's actually quite good book that our coach gave to me. I don't know why. He said, go fast and fix things. And the first kind of like thing, how to change that is trust, not in the lawyer speaking, but
it's a different concept. Yeah.
Like you need to build trust within the organization so you can go fast and you can fix things. Fixing things, but doesn't mean that everything will be okay. And especially, like why are you afraid your test will fail? You are afraid only if the cost of failure is too big, right? But if you get an experimentation platform where you can actually do 5 tests and they cost you close to nothing, and like junior analysts can do them in one day, you actually encourage experimentation, because out of those 5 experiments, 1 sticks and you move forward with it. Am I correct or not?
No, you are. I was thinking when you were speaking that the answer is scope down. Split the task into something that the cost of failure is manageable, and then split it into small tests, which is what most of Reddit comes to mind, where they test everything. And we at Kindred also do some tests on our UI front, for instance, and it is small tests, incremental tests that anyone can do. A single failure will not break the bank.
Yeah, don't bet the whole business.
No.
Okay.
Scope down.
Thank you. Next question from Natasha Wright. How do we see citizens being able to challenge decisions which are perhaps AI generated? Inclusivity and fairness, responsible AI?
Okay, so,
Emma?
Yeah. So we have the rights under data law if it's been made there's an automated decision right, although the UK government's talking about removing that. And we also have equalities legislation. So in theory, we have the tools. But the point being, and I think this is the really interesting point around your kind of data provenance, the governance around it, because as a company, if you get challenged, being able to answer that exam question, but also anticipate it, is really important, because where we are at the moment is, I don't know whether people saw that the insurance algorithm was quoting people in very racially diverse parts of Britain far higher than other parts. That's a really bad press story. And so we already have these examples emerging. So for instance, Apple, the credit card algo was refusing women more often than men for the credit card, because it was a decision going on. So we do have the personal data rights, but it's then it's a real issue for us that even if you've got the transparency, how do you then enforce your rights? We then go back to the trust and which businesses you're prepared to do business with, because you have this nice transparency around the decisions they're making and the tools that they're using, and what data is going to be used and when. Because I think actually when it gets to the real pointed end, which is I've had a decision be made about me, but it wasn't on my personal data, where do I start first in challenging? The only thing that you're really left with is a class act, actually, which is not, and we're not in the States, they're just sort of emerging. So I think it's a real issue, but I do think people will come out, market leaders from companies that can address it. I don't know whether people have seen the Apple article where some of the pension investors want to know more about the ethics around their AI. So it is starting to bleed in.
Great.
It's also why the models have to be explainable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap up. This is from Andrew. With the EU, US, and the WEF drawing up their own versions of regulatory frameworks, on the scale of rigidness, where do you think the UK is going to sit and compare?
So it depends on which government we have this time next year, I suspect.
Okay, well, why don't you do where we
like
are
always
now, and maybe with a new government, given that you look at both?
So I think with a new government, we will have more of a regulatory focus. I don't think we will go in as heavy as the EU AI Act. And I think that's already being slightly discredited with this discussion on LLMs and how they held off, and now they're being acquired by Microsoft. I also think there was a real sense with ministers in other countries that that's a big cost of compliance. But I think they will focus very much on consumers and then ensuring where AI is being deployed in different industries where it will impact and harm consumers, that there is a lot tighter regulation.
And will the UK, do you think, be more rigid than the US?
Well, the US isn't very rigid, so it's not a hard yardstick. So yes.
Can I ask what new regulations is actually needed? Because from where, I know it's controversial, but like I'm asking.
No, it's a fair point. I've scratched my head over it as well. So I think there are some gaps around biometric and facial recognition. Mm-hmm. The fact that there are private companies you were face wrecking us for years and no one was doing anything about it. There's an ICO decision about biometric data being collected and it's dubious, arguably already covered under GDPR. But I suspect the legislation is more in the kind of giving these regulators the money and the capacity and the capabilities around pursuing these things. Because you have your GDPR, you have your equalities legislation, there may be more stuff around health and safety. I don't know, that's not my expertise, but I'm not convinced that a general AI Act is needed.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
Okay, last question from Alex McClintock. How do you talk to CEOs who think that generative AI and large language models are great, but they don't understand the pros and cons? How do you approach them? Pavel, why don't you take that?
Well, I leave them just that they are great, right? Why should I come? This is like, for me, this is like first time I can actually talk to them about this,
Yep.
Like before, like when I talk to your question, I was thinking about like what changes very dramatically if you have a board which has, like younger people and technical people, right? That's totally different conversation.
Yeah.
But those are all the startups like Rohlik or Carvago I showed you, right? And that's okay. But for older companies, this like ChatGPT is a Netscape moment for those of you who remember, right? We had internet before. We were Veronica, Gopher, Wright, Telnet. We were happy, ASCII art was kind of a problem, but then, like I couldn't talk to my mom about what I do. Right? Just like she didn't understand. But then Netscape came and pictures and hyperlinks. I was like, oh, this. Not really, but yes, right? I didn't go to explain on TCP/IP protocol, and this is the same with generative AI. Yeah. They are using their kids are using it for school. Like when they go somewhere, they query ChatGPT, give me recommendations, so they know they have an idea. From that picture, I was showing the different kinds, like, then I show them, and I was like, guys, this is awesome. It has problems, hallucination, blah, blah, blah. We can use it for documentation, for your, user trainings and stuff. But there's this other kind of AI that we can, oh, okay, right? So I just, I'm happy they want to use it. I'm happy.
Thank you, Pavel. I think we could keep going, but we won't because I know you're hungry and you're thirsty and you've been a terrific audience. So I want to thank Emma, Pavel, and Guy for their keynotes and for their conversation now. So
Thank
give
you.
it up for the three of them.